Welcome back to another edition of We Rise Fighting Labor Podcast. We bring you today's labor news, history, and analysis from the U.S. and around the world. This is a podcast you listen to with your fellow workers organizing on the shop floor. This is a podcast you listen to before walking into your union meeting. As always, I'm Rico Rutia, here with my co-host, Bryan Pfeiffer. In this episode, Bryan's going to talk to us about garment workers standing in solidarity with Palestine, also about an urgent appeal from the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. I'm going to talk about House Resolution 2882 and funding for Israeli militarization. Also going to cover the Molson Coors workers who are on strike in Fort Worth and how members of REI marched as a union on their bosses, and Kenyan doctors being on a nationwide strike, and finally the Salem-Keizer teachers union votes to approve a possible strike. All that and more. And for the first time on this show, we would like to include other headlines that didn't quite make it. We generally try to keep our shows to between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, and so we always have to cut out a lot of articles. So moving forward, we would just like to offer some headlines that didn't quite make it and let you know what our source was and what the date was on that. So you can go ahead and find it if you're interested, if it's relevant to you, or if you just want to know more. And so today's the first time we're going to be doing that. And the headlines read as follows. Amazon workers at UK warehouse strike again over pay union recognition. That's in Reuters, March 19th. LA City transportation workers authorize a strike. That's in CBSNews.com, dated March 20th. Thousands of Spanish bank staff strike to demand pay raise, a union says. That's in Reuters, March 22nd. Boston University graduate workers plan to strike starting Monday. That's in Boston.com. And strike paralyzing cargo at Finnish ports extended for third week. You can find that in maritimeexecutive.com, and that's dated March 22nd. And as always, we celebrate music and culture and poetry and art and all of that. So we always like to start our episodes with precisely that. A little bit of music, a little bit of poetry, a little bit of something. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to Bryan to introduce today's music. What are we listening to today, Bryan?
The Irish people have a long history of internationalism, rooted in the fight against British and U.S. neocolonialism. For example, this year at St. Paddy's Day events worldwide, March 17th, Palestinian flags were flown by many Irish in Ireland and in diaspora, including in the area now known as the United States. Many signs and banners, such as "From Ireland to Palestine, occupation is a crime," were carried with pride. Uplifting this internationalism, we bring to We Rise Fighting, this episode, Brother Christy Moore's anti-fascist song, performed live in Glasgow, Scotland, where pro-Palestinian sentiment is also strong. Viva la Quinta Brigada honors the anti-fascists fighting Franco and his Western backers, such as the U.S., in 1936 with a ringing chorus for the ages. Viva la Quinta Brigada, no pasaran, the pledge that made them fight. Adelante was the cry around the hillside. Let us all remember them tonight. Here's Christy Moore and his band with Viva la Quinta Brigada.
And 10 years before I saw the light of morn, a convict ship of heroes was laid. From every corner of the world came sailing the 15th International Brigade. They came to stand beside the Spanish people to try and stem the rising fascist tide. Franco's allies were the powerful and wealthy. Frank Ryan's men came from the other side. Even the olives were bleeding as the battle for Madrid had thundered on. Truth and love against the force of evil. brotherhood against the fascist left. Viva la Quinta Brigada, no pass around the pledge that made him fight. Adelante is the crier on the hillside. Let us remember them tonight. Bob Hillard was a Church of Ireland pastor. From Killarney across the Pyrenees he came. From there he came a brave young Christian brother. Side by side they fought and died in Spain. And Tommy Woods at 17 died in Cordoba. With the Vienna he learned to hold the gun. From Dublin to the Via del Rio, where they fought and died beneath the Spanish sun. Viva la Quinta Brigada, no pass around the pledge that made him fight. Adelante is the crier on the hillside. Let us remember them tonight. And the Irishman heard the call of Franco, joined Hitler and Mussolini too. The propaganda from the pulpit and newspapers had done Duffy to gather up his crew. And the word came from the church, support the Nazis. Men at last they failed again. The bishops blessed the blue shirts down in Galway as they sailed beneath the swastika to Spain. Viva la Quinta Brigada, no pass around the pledge that made a fight. Adelante is the crier of the hillside. Let us remember them tonight. And this song is a tribute to Frank Riley, Fitz Conway and Vinnie Cody too, Peter Daly, Charlie Reagan and Hugh Bonner. So many died again but never few. Danny Boyle, Leslie Brown and Charlie Dundee, Liam Tomlinson and Jim Straney from Short Strand, Jack Nelty, Tommy Patton and Frank Conroy, Jim Foley, Tony Fox and Dick Longley. Viva la Quinta Brigada, no pass around the pledge that made fight. Adelante is the crier of the hillside. Let us remember them tonight. Viva la Quinta Brigada, let us remember them tonight. Okay, we'll sing it. Viva la Quinta Brigada, let us remember them tonight. Let us remember them.
Okay, listeners, here at We Rise Fighting, we have, for many episodes, started off the show with Palestine news, information, and analysis. And today we do that here again. These news items are available from laborforpalestine.net. This is one of our places we go for information, and there's a variety of information there, such as resolutions and updates and news from unions in the United States and worldwide, laborforpalestine.net. The Garment Workers Center in Los Angeles stands with Palestine. They put out a statement recently, which reads, quote, "Our members and staff stand in solidarity with the movement for Palestinian liberation. Members reached this decision after engaging in educational workshops and discussion together since October 7th, 2023, and have agreed that an organizational position would be a positive act of solidarity, as well as joining local actions. Many of our members were displaced from their homes by similar U.S.-backed campaigns of genocide. They live below the poverty line in substandard housing with precarious health and food security. And there's more at the Garment Worker Center website and Facebook page, and also laborforpalestine.net. And in a very important update to a statement that was put out late October, which we have discussed here many times, at We Rise Fighting, the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions has put out a statement entitled On International Workers' Day, an urgent appeal from the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. And we are going to read this in its entirety, listeners, because the odds of this happening or being heard anywhere in the United States, of course, on corporate media, much less other media, might be not available here in this country. So we want to make sure that this statement is read in its entirety. It can be downloaded at laborforpalestine.net as well. There's a link at that website, and it's also reposted at the Wisconsin Bailout the People movement website, wibailoutpeople.org. So the full statement in its entirety starts, brothers and sisters of unions and other labor organizations in the United States of America. In the midst of pain and blood in the displacement camps, amidst the rubble and the ruins of our homes, workshops, factories, stores, and institutions destroyed by the Israeli, quote unquote, occupation using US-made weapons in the name of the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, we call on you for solidarity. Instead of celebrating with you on May 1st, May Day, International Workers' Day, we are busy shrouding dozens of people who are being killed around the clock in the middle of a genocidal war against our people, in every sense of that word. This has led to the destruction of everything in the Gaza Strip: hospitals, health centers, schools, universities, streets, water purification, sewage and other infrastructure, factories, shops, cultural centers, mosques, churches, and even unborn children, none of which were spared by the occupation's bombs, missiles, and shells, including internationally banned weapons like white phosphorus. The statement continues, we are living through wholesale slaughter and forced dislocation, ethnic cleansing committed against us. This devastating war and its catastrophes have forced upon us in the PGFTU in Gaza significant responsibilities to collect the broken bodies and even pieces of our people, healing the wounded and trying to ease their pain without anesthetics, antibiotics, or other medicine, dealing with the psychological trauma, especially of the children, while trying to convey the truth of this suffering and the humanitarian and environmental catastrophe to the world. Since the beginning of the aggression, we in the PGFTU have considered ourselves an integral part of our people, not separated from their reality. We have lost thousands of members, union offices, facilities, and other institutions. Despite our efforts to provide relief to our people with the limited support we have received and to raise the voice of our people loudly in international forums, we have encountered shocking silence and neglect by the international labor movement. However, we recognize there have been some exceptional examples of unions clearly demonstrated in leading protest denouncing the Zionist war of genocide being waged on the Gaza Strip. Dear comrades in the American unions, several actions have come to light during the aggression, which must be closely observed and exposed. Most notably, first, U.S. unions need to expose the extent of the war crimes and genocide committed against our people and the biased American position and complicity in enabling the aggression. This must be confronted and continue to be protested to exert pressure against the export of U.S.-made weapons to the occupation. Pressure must be increased on the U.S. administration to abandon these hostile actions against the Palestinian people. Secondly, there is the Israeli decision to suspend or terminate the contracts of thousands of workers in the Gaza Strip by local Arab and international institutions in connection with the war of extermination. depriving employees of their rights and compensation. It would have been better for these institutions to strengthen the workers' economic security by implementing support packages instead of firing them from work. This issue must be at the core of your concerns and struggle. Third, the international labor movement, including the International Federation of Trade Unions, retreated to verbal positions without taking measures on the ground or pressuring the decision makers to stop this war of extermination, limiting union activities to conferences and statements, and not delving deeply into the need to guarantee humanitarian aid or influencing international public opinion to expose the truth about Zionist crimes and the practices of the allied countries that continue to support Israel. Among these steps is the struggle to ban the occupation's trade unions internationally, as they are partners in the war of genocide. In particular, we call on American unions to boycott these unions to protest their complicity in this genocidal war. Fourth, unions can play an influential role in the United States to provide relief for hundreds of thousands of workers' families whose homes and workplaces have been destroyed, leaving them to shelter in tents without any work or income. You can contribute to financial projects and relief funds for workers and temporary Social Security through coordination with the International Trade Union Confederation to alleviate the suffering of thousands of our people. Dear comrades, the statement concludes, we call on you to be our voice and advocate inside and outside America. What our people are experiencing and what workers and unions in particular are exposed to is the most horrific catastrophe known to humanity in recent decades. We ask that you convey our message and give voice to the suffering of hungry, starving workers and their families, not just to the American people, not just to your unions, but to the entire world. We are a people enduring bombardment, hunger, disease, and all forms of suffering, but we are determined to live, to stand firm, and to rebuild from this destruction with our blood and many sacrifices. Thank you for your efforts, and Happy New Year on International Workers' Day. We will certainly carry the banner of victory despite the killing and destruction. From your comrades, trade and professional unions in Gaza, the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. Signatory Bashir al-Sisi, member of the General Secretariat of the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions. And now to you, Rick.
Thank you, Bryan. I will also continue the reporting on Palestine as well. You know, this past week, I saw a couple of postings about House Resolution 2882, and I was getting caught up on reading about it right before the show. I didn't get a chance to do that before today, so I'm still just getting caught up on this. I wanted to share an article that I read, just a little bit of it. This is from Al Jazeera. The article, the headline is "Moral Failure: U.S. House Approves Bill That Would Ban UNRWA Funding." Palestinian rights advocates decry push to defund UN agency for Palestinian refugees amid starvation crisis in Gaza. The United States House of Representatives has approved a $1.2 trillion funding bill that would ban funding for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, amid the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. You know, I just highlighted humanitarian catastrophe because really whenever I see that word, I just translate it to genocide because just got to be real with y'all. So just need to point that out and also remind you that this is an Al Jazeera article. This isn't, you know, anything further to the left or that would say the word genocide. Just leave it at that. The article continues. The measure, which passed in a vote on Friday, would keep the government fully functioning in advance of a partial shutdown deadline. The proposed legislation now goes to the Senate, which must pass it by midnight on Friday, and it did, just so listeners know, when several government agencies would start running out of money. President Joe Biden has promised to sign the bill into law immediately if the Democratic-controlled upper chamber of Congress passes the legislation as expected. The measure faced opposition from dozens of far-right Republicans who argued that it does not curb government spending enough. 22 Democrats, many of which had expressed concerns about the UNRWA provision, joined Republicans in opposing the ban. Maya Berry, executive director of the Arab American Institute, called the passage of the bill an incredible moral failure. And here's a quote from Barry. Our political process has chosen to cut U.S. funding to literally the only entity that can address the level of suffering and scale of suffering that's happening in Gaza right now, is what Barry said to Al Jazeera. And that was just a portion of that article. And again, I was reading that in preparation for today's show. And at the same time, I was telling Bryan that that also got me geeking out on it a little bit. And so I did go on congress.gov. I went on their website, and anytime you hear .gov at the end of a website URL, that means it's from the government, right? So this is the official government congressional record that's public for us to read. And so that's where I went to read about HR 2882. And I would like to share some excerpts of what is inside this bill. So Section 8072 reads as follows. Of the amounts appropriated in this act under the headings procurement, defense-wide, and research, development, test, and evaluation defense-wide, 500 million shall be for the Israel cooperative programs, provided that of this amount, 80 million should be for the Secretary of Defense to provide to the government of Israel for the procurement of the Iron Dome defense system to counter short-range rocket threats. 127 million shall be for the short-range ballistic missile defense. $40 million should be for the co-production activities of SRBMD systems in the United States and Israel to meet Israel's defense requirements. 80 million shall be for upper-tier component to the Israeli missile defense architecture. All of this is going to Israel, all right? And all of this is in this bill. If we move forward a little bit to another section of this bill, we even have scholarship programs, loan guarantees, and also there's one section that talks about 5 million being made available for refugees resettling in Israel. All right, that's the section under Department of State, subsection Migration and Refugee Assistance. The amount of funding that the United States wants to send to Israel, wants to send to missile defense systems, wants to send to Iron Dome, and at the same time, cutting relief programs while Palestinians starve. I mean, really, we've said it on this show before. Like, if you don't know what side you're on at this point, there it is in black and white. The U.S. letting you know exactly where. $500 million. I mean, could that money not have been used here? Could that money not have been used to rebuild Palestine? But really, could that money not have been used here to alleviate the suffering here, alleviate the poverty here, give people health care, the proper education they need, create jobs? Like, why is it going to Israel? In another section, the resolution reads as follows. Of the funds appropriated by this act under the heading, quote, Foreign Military Financing Program, unquote, not less than 3.3 billion shall be available for grants only for Israel, which shall be dispersed within 30 days of the enactment of this act for advanced weapon systems, of which not less than 725 million shall be made available for the procurement in Israel of defense articles and defense services, including research and development. $3.3 billion. Now, what was the reaction in the House? All right, here's the vote breakdown. 22 Democrats, 22 voted against it. 112 Republicans voted against it. And as the article from Al Jazeera mentioned, they may be far right-wing Republicans, but still, it's 5 times the number of Republicans voted correctly a no on this bill. How many Democrats voted in favor? 185 Democrats voted in favor. Again, in contrast to Republicans, 101 voted in favor. Again, the the Democratic Party really leading the genocidal warmongering cry here. I mention all of this because these elections are coming up, and yes, there's a huge debate, and there's a debate so big that we can't encompass it on this one show, but we will speak to the labor part of it because right now is a time when union leaders are getting us to try to vote for these people. They're giving our union dues to Joe Biden. And when you see numbers like this, it's like, no, the Democratic Party is more right wing than the Republican Party. They're more genocidal. They're more warmongering. It was the Democratic Party that shut down the railway strike. The Democratic Party didn't do anything when Roe v. Wade was overturned. The Biden administration has deported more immigrants than Trump did. And you want me to do what? You want me to vote for this party, for this candidate? Uh, I words I don't know what to say to that at this point. It's completely out of reason. And that's why we have this show, again, to let people know, especially union members know that there's no law, there's no holy grail, there's nothing written in stone that says that our unions have to give money to the Democratic Party. There's nothing that says that we are bound to this. And so if you're a union member and you recognize that Joe Biden and these Democrats are carrying out genocidal acts against Palestinians, and you see your union giving money to this party and to Joe Biden, you as a union member can push back against that because there's no law, there's no holy grail, it's not written in stone anywhere that says that unions have to endorse and support the Democratic Party. Speaking of the railway strike, it was 10,000 railway workers that were ready to go on strike. 10,000. And we had a whole show about this, right? About the $2 billion a day, that whole media scare about how if these workers went on strike, it would cost the economy $2 billion a day. Later on, the media corrected that number, but nevertheless, the sensationalism had already been created, that atmosphere, the fear. If anything, the ruling class, the capitalist class, told us something. The capitalist class told us about the power of 10,000 workers, 10,000 workers, 10,000 railroad workers. It told us about the power of those workers. It told us about the power of the working class. Okay. And other unions like the United Auto Workers, SAG-AFTRA, Kaiser Permanente workers, and although the Teamsters didn't strike, I'm going to add them on that list, like showed us that in just a few weeks of strikes, you can make more gains for working class people than you can by endorsing and funding and promoting and begging anything of the Democratic Party. So why are we bothering with them? Why are we bothering with them? They're they, they're more right wing than the Republicans at this point. Why are we bothering with them when the working class has the power of the strike? When the working class seems to be gaining some momentum, why are we bothering with the Democratic Party? So that's the news that I wanted to cover as far as House Resolution 2882. If you want to look further into it, it's on the congress.gov website. You can go ahead and search for it and do keyword finds in there. In sharing this episode, I did a keyword find for Israel, and that's how I was able to share what I just did. So please have at it. We wanted to report on that because we will continue reporting on Palestine. Up next, we are continuing to report on the Molson Coors strike in Fort Worth, Texas. This article came out in the dallasnews.com. The headline reads, Molson Coors workers in Fort Worth see no end in sight as strike enters second month. Now, again, this is dallasnews.com. This is not coming from the Teamsters or anything like that. So Take the bias however you will. And the article reads as follows. The strike at Fort Worth's Molson Coors brewery is now entering its second month, with union leaders seeing no visible signs of an agreement. The 420 striking workers, represented by Teamsters Local 997 and Molson Coors, are still far apart in negotiations over issues such as pay raises and an end to the company's two-tiered healthcare and retirement benefits. Last month, the union rejected an offer from Molson Coors that included a 99-cent raise over 3 years. 99-cent raise over 3 years. What's that, 33 cents at best? Check out this next sentence. In the company's year-round financial results, President and CEO Gavin Hattersley said 2023 was a monumental year as Molson Coors reported annual revenue of $11.7 billion, with sales up 9.4% over the previous year. And this is a quote. Growth is not a strong enough word to describe what we achieved in 2023. We've set a new baseline for our business, and you don't need to look any further than our bottom line, their bottom line being their profits. He told analysts during a company's year-round results call, I know a number of you remain skeptical of our ability to grow this year. You were skeptical in 2022 and also in 2023, but the numbers don't lie. We delivered what we said we would. All right, listen to those sentences. They're offering these workers at best 33 cents per year for 3 years raise. Are you serious? And they're reporting 11.7 billion in revenues. That's incredible. The article goes on. Molson Coors declined an interview request from the Dallas Morning News, but said in a statement over email that operations have not slowed down since the strike began. And I think it's important to note that. And it's important to note that because of this next sentence, actually. Adam Collins, the company's chief communication officer, said contingency plans at the plant have allowed Molson Coors to meet demand. Now, this is the part where I really do wish that I had caught this article sooner and maybe was able to reach out to the Teamsters, or the Teamsters had something on their website, because I would like to hear their take on this, because contingency plans, the boss's contingency plans, that's something that we've talked about on this show. As far as organizing a strike, what should you be prepared for when organizing a strike? The boss's contingency plans. In other words, how the boss is going to keep things going, because that's going to affect what you do. And here's what this is what Molson Coors is saying. We're still brewing, packaging, and shipping out of Fort Worth, and we have actually exceeded our production expectations each week since the strike began, he said. Our other 5 U.S. breweries are absorbing extra production. Listen to that. Our other 5 U.S. breweries are absorbing extra production. That's the contingency plan, is to have the other breweries absorb the production. And we deliberately built up distributor inventories earlier this year. All right, that's also part of the contingency plan. That's the sort of thing that we need to pay attention to during these struggles and in preparation for these struggles. The article continues. Since the strike began, Molson Coors has also attempted to bring on temporary workers by posting job listings for opportunities like temporary brewery workers. For workers like John Thomas, a shipping clerk at the facility for 20 years, it's been frustrating to see the money go to replacement workers and not the company's full-timers. Replacement workers are being paid $25.98 an hour, along with $200 in weekly attendance bonuses, according to the job listing. And here's a quote from John Thomas. It's very disheartening that they'll offer these scabs $200 bonuses for attendance pay, and they wouldn't give that to us, is what Thomas said. They could be paying us that money. You look around and it's ridiculous. They've got to hire extra security, put some extra fences up, and pay all the scabs. All that money, and it could have been used on us instead. That doesn't even bring into this is me now, that doesn't even bring into account the attorney fees, right? Which that's always astronomical. And the bosses always hire attorneys to fight the union. And that's always an astronomical number. The article finishes by saying, Workers at the brewing plant typically receive between $27 to $35 an hour, depending on their job. However, without their paycheck, workers are using the union strike fund to get by. Each striker is receiving more than $1,000 a week. So that's the update from Molson Coors. If the Teamsters post something, then we will go ahead and report on that. Bryan, you and I will also talk about possibly having one of the strikers on our show so they can give us better insight of what's happening on the ground. Because again, this is from dallasnews.com. I wanted to share that because I wanted to share those contingency plans and the types of lessons that we can get from understanding the boss's contingency plan. All right, they're going to use replacement workers, temporary workers, in other words, scabs. They're going to move production to other facilities. Okay, they're going to stock up on whatever it is they need to keep production and sales going. Those are the contingency plans, and those are the types of things that we as workers and organized workers and union workers and union workers or organized workers preparing to strike. Those are the types of lessons and notes that we have to take when we're preparing for a strike or any struggle of that sort. So moving ahead with our labor news, Bryan is going to talk to us about members of REI marching in on their bosses. What's going on with that, Bryan?
Thanks, Rick. Members of the REI union march on their bosses and take other collective action. Workers are organizing at 9 stores and counting within REI. They sell camping gear at this store. It's a chain across the country and beyond. From a March 16th, 2024 post at their Facebook page, facebook.com, REI Union. That's REI Union on Facebook. Quote, I thought they strive towards this progressive image, this idea that our workers are our lifeblood. To see this campaign against workers has been a stark reality change. Alenia Preddy, a green vest at REI Castleton worker, was quoted at the REI Union's Facebook page. This comprehensive piece, and they're referring to a Huffington Post article, outlines why it was so necessary for us, the workers, to take collective action last week and bring the bargaining table to REI's headquarters. They thanked the reporter and HuffPost for reporting on that and state it's crucial that everyone understands just how much time and energy REI devotes to union busting. And the union states, despite REI's failure to come negotiate, even when we bring it to their doorstep, we're not slowing down. We kept the momentum going this week with another store filing, growing our collective voice even further. And the union says it's time for REI to come to grips with reality and meet us at the bargaining table. And as we reported here on We Rise Fighting, this is just one of many organizing campaigns going on in industries and sectors all over the United States, in places that some said just a few years ago couldn't be organized. But we're seeing with new technology and the fight back of the workers under the depression that we're facing in this country under capitalism, that especially being led by youth workers, but also many others, there are organizing campaigns that are on fire and moving forward at Starbucks, at REI, at Trader Joe's, and many, many other locations. And we here at We Rise Fighting will continue to report on them and send them solidarity as well. All right, Rick, back to you.
Okay, a couple of stories left here tonight. One is coming from Kenya. This is on abcnews.com. The headline reads, hundreds of Kenyan doctors protest in the streets as national strike enters second week. Hundreds of Kenyan doctors have protested in the streets demanding better pay and working conditions in an ongoing national strike that has entered its second week. Always the case, right? Better pay and working conditions in an ongoing nationwide strike that has entered its second week. The doctors carried placards and chanted against the Kenyan government, saying it had failed to implement a raft of promises, including a collective bargaining agreement signed in 2017 after a 100-day strike during which people died from lack of care. Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists, and Dentists Union Secretary General Dr. Davji Bimji said the strike will continue until all the demands are met. And this is a quote, We have nothing else to lose but the chains of poverty and distress that we've been having. I love that quote. That's a little bit of Rosa Luxemburg right there. We have nothing to lose but our chains. The standoff has left thousands of Kenyans without much needed public health services. Health Minister Susan Nakumicha on Wednesday said she had instructed two top referral hospitals to recruit doctors to replace those taking part in the national strike. See that? See that? That's why I wanted to talk about that Teamsters strike, because this is always the boss's contingency plan. This is also always what the bosses do. They replace. We need to prepare for that. We need to understand that. That's why we need to build community support with unions. That's why the union and the community have to be one. They have to be indistinguishable, if you will. Bimji said the hiring of new doctors to replace those on strike would not settle the underlying labor concerns that caused the strike. I'm very sure those doctors cannot run those hospitals because those terms are quite exploitative and demeaning, he said. The doctors on Thursday stopped providing emergency services at public hospitals as they escalated the strike despite a court order calling for talks between the union and the health ministry. Kenya's head of the public services, Felix Kozge, met late Thursday with union officials and various ministries and said the government is willing to implement the collective bargaining agreement, but in phases due to financial constraints. So, always a part of this show, international coverage. We bring you as much as we possibly can. And, we also like to bring you stuff. Of course, we've done a lot of articles and a lot of news reports from Europe. And those are certainly important, but we are also trying to bring more African nations into our reporting. So that was a little bit from Kenya today. And the final article for today is Salem-Keizer Teachers Union votes to approve possible strike, and this is in opb.org. After an authorization vote this week, educators at Oregon's second largest school district are prepared to strike. A strike would likely take place shortly after spring break, but the union has not announced a start date. The Salem-Keizer Education Association has voted to approve a strike as bargaining continues with administrators in Oregon's second largest school district. The teachers union in Salem-Keizer Public Schools made the announcement Friday. More than 94% of voting members voted yes to authorize a strike, according to a press release with more than 99% of eligible voters casting a vote. Now, I highlighted that in the article because listen to that. That's 94% voted yes, with more than 99% of eligible members voting. I think that just speaks to how working class people are down to engage. They're down to have the discussions, have the democratic debate, go back and forth, and cast a vote on something. I wanted to highlight that because this is important to these working peoples, to these workers, to these education workers. The association represents more than 2,600 licensed employees, including teachers, nurses, and counselors who serve more than 40,000 students at 65 schools. Now, again, I really wanted to highlight those numbers who turned out to vote because of the significance of all of this. There's 40,000 students at 65 schools. When it's something that affects working class people, yeah, we'll turn out to vote. But when we're feeling alienated from this duopoly, from this choice between a genocidal president that we have right now or a right-wing fascist populist, whatever you want to call Trump, and people don't turn out to vote, it's not apathy, it's alienation. But when something comes up that directly affects people, well, here's the numbers. 94% of voting members voted yes to authorize a strike, with more than 99% of eligible members voting. So I just wanted to highlight that for that reason. If it's something that tangibly, materially, immediately affects working class people, they'll turn out and they'll vote, they'll participate. And again, we watch strikes, and we watch strikes so closely because there's so many nuggets of wisdom that always comes out of a strike. If you listen to prior broadcasts, you hear Everything from acts of solidarity and mutual aid to exactly how to run the food program during the strike. Those are all nuggets of wisdom, both for fighting right now in the struggle and the strike and union struggle against capitalism, and also for building a better world. Building a better world. This type of thing shows us that working class people can converge and have these discussions and have these votes that are critical to us. These votes are critical not just to the workers, but to the 40,000 students at 65 schools in this particular case. So I wanted to highlight all of that for that reason. It's not working class apathy. We see what's going on. We know what's and who is on the ballot, but we're feeling alienated. This system doesn't represent us. This duopoly doesn't represent us. This genocidal president doesn't represent us. This other right-wing fascist monger doesn't represent us either. The article continues. Today, Salem-Keizer educators have made it clear that they want our bargaining team to continue to fight for a contract that makes substantial improvements for students and educators in our neighborhood public schools, said SKEA President Tyler Sciallo-Lakeberg. We remain hopeful that we'll reach a fair deal at the table without having to resort to a strike, and we were encouraged by positive movement during this past Wednesday's mediation session, she said. But we will continue to prepare for the possibility of a strike if we determine it is necessary to reach a fair deal. Union leaders were surprised back in September when the district called for mediation. Mediation was then delayed in the fall during Portland's historic strike, which lasted nearly the entire month of November. The Salem-Keizer Union declared an impasse last month. If Salem-Keizer teachers do go on strike, it would mean educators in both of Oregon's two largest school districts hit picket lines in the same academic year. Salem-Keizer educators have never gone on strike, and the association has never taken a strike vote. Listen to that. Listen to that. They had never taken a strike vote, and that's what their numbers look like. Teachers in Portland public schools have previously authorized a strike several years ago, but the month-long walkout last year was the first time they'd actually gone on one. One of the largest sticking points in Salem centers on how the district defines full-time employees. Should the SKEA bargaining team decide a strike is necessary, it will provide a 10-day notice of intent to strike to the Oregon Employment Relations Board. So that's another thing that we've always touched on here on this show, right? Like, unions, workers always have to give notice, taking away the element of surprise, allowing the boss to come up with a contingency plan, allowing the boss to come up with job postings looking for scabs, allowing the boss to figure things out and not be affected by the strike. So when we talk about the types of hurdles that unions have to jump through before they can go on strike, this is a perfect example of one of them. As of Friday, no strike date was set or announced. Salem-Keizer educators do not want to strike. We want to be in schools with our students, Scalia-Lakeberg said, but we will strike if we have to. Another mediation session is scheduled between the two sides on Monday. It's possible a resolution could be reached before the strike takes place. However, if a strike happens, schools will close, which goes for both in-person and online learning. Classified workers, such as custodians and nutrition service workers, would continue working in the schools because they are represented by another union. Now, I also had to highlight that they're represented by another union and they're keep on working. In a perfect world, if I could just wave my arms and make something happen, I would say, hey, you know what? Maybe those union workers should also go on strike to help out the other workers who are on strike, in solidarity to give them more fight. But sadly, I don't have that magical arm, but I can speak to it here on this microphone. So there it is.
So, Rick, I'd just like to close the show before your comments closing. Today, if listeners are unaware, is February 3rd was the 25th year of the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez Frias was inaugurated as president of the then Republic of Venezuela under his political leadership, and since then, Poverty has decreased substantially in Venezuela, especially with relationships with People's Cuba and around the world. They are still facing a vicious blockade by the United States, and they fight on. So we send solidarity to the Bolivarian Revolution there. Also, today is unfortunately the anniversary of former Bishop Oscar Romero, who was assassinated March 24th, 1980, by the death squads in El Salvador. And they were supported, these death squads, by the US. It was later revealed. And Bishop Romero was a great friend to the poor and working people in El Salvador and around the world, and this is why he was assassinated. But the continued struggle continues right here, and it's an honor to be on the show here with my comrade, Rick, who is from El Salvador, if listeners are unfamiliar with that. And we are continuing Bishop Romero and the people of El Salvador and Central and Latin America, from Venezuela to El Salvador, to build a better world for all poor and working people. Back to you, Rick.
That's right. Oscar Romero presente, the hope he instilled, the principles he stood behind, the movements he was a part of. Hats off to Oscar Romero. And hats off to the people in El Salvador who taught me so many things and left us with so many lessons. Lessons about how to build a united front, lessons about struggle, lessons about strikes, lessons about militancy. Thank you to Oscar Romero and everyone who struggled in the 80s, in particular in El Salvador, and always, but certainly in the 80s. Hats off to everyone there. Oscar Romero presente. Oscar Romero and the Salvadoran labor movement is actually what helped bring this show into being. For those who don't know, it started just as a simple conversation between myself, Jerry, and Bryan, and we got a little group going around us at the People's Power Summit. And from there, we were like, hey, you know, this stuff is just rolling off the top of our heads. Why don't we just make it into a show? And here it is. And we've stuck to that and bring you all the latest news on strikes, updates on Palestine, and all related information, including, of course, cultural content. We always have music for you because we think that the struggle needs music and life needs music. So we bring that to you in celebration of music and culture. So thank you everyone again for listening tonight. Love and solidarity to all. Take care, everyone.